Hello, Humane Marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation.
Hi, Cara. So nice to have
Hi,
you.
good to see you, Sarah. How's it going?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really look forward to this conversation with you. I was on your podcast recently and we
Yep.
really were aligned. So I'm glad we
Yeah.
have you on the Marketing Podcast and talking about networking, right? So that's kind of your specialty. And I want to just go dive right in. So tell me, how did you come to make networking part of your specialty, and how did you build a community around networking? Why is networking so important to you?
It was kind of an accident because I don't really think of myself as a networking person. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way because there's this connotation around networking that it's sort of like very businessy and very like you imagine yourself in a room with very professional people and you're handing out business cards and you're talking about things that are very business related. But I think in my life, as in my career, I've sort of acted more as just a connector. I think of it as connecting with people and building relationships. And that's usually not on a grand scale. It's one person at a time, usually in a one-to-one conversation. And it doesn't feel like what you would imagine networking to be. So I think maybe a little shift in the way we think about networking can help a lot of us who don't like that whole, you know, big corporate business vibe and really care more about one-to-one relationships and what goes on beyond the business.
Yeah. That's already such a shift when you say relationship building versus networking.
Mm-hmm.
Has that term work in it, right? And so it feels like I'm the one going into this crowd and I have to work my way through it like, and
Yeah.
collect the business cards. And it's kind of like, yeah, that.
And I think expanding our understanding of working beyond or even relationship building beyond thinking of who we are going to build relationships with to thinking about who we can connect so they can build relationships.
Mm,
Because then you expand your network exponentially because then they also consider you part of their and both of you're part of both of their network, and then they're connecting, and then when they meet new people they want to introduce you. So it's kind of like weaving a web of connection with
mm,
people that you genuinely want to talk to and spend time with and respect.
mm. It's funny you use that term weaving, because in our community we have one of the calls that is kind of like a networking call, but we actually call it net weaving.
I
So
love that.
it's this idea of, yeah, we're together and we're getting to know one another, but we're weaving these relationships and
Yeah, I love
connections.
that.
Yeah.
In Ravel, we have connection calls that are just to talk about whatever we want to talk about and connect. We had one yesterday, and a bunch of us were on there just talking about what vacations we're taking and a little bit about business and what we're looking at challenges right now. And then we have a small business mastermind where we all break
Mm,
off. And then we have a happy hour once a month. And
right.
otherwise, we're just hanging out in the community, getting to know each other and asking business related questions and personal questions. And,
Right.
I think it's a little bit deeper than just what do you do and who do you do it for? Like the elevator pitch doesn't matter so much when you know somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. you really addressed something there. It's this superficiality that I always hated at networking events, that I felt like people were only listening to themselves talk and preparing what they were going to say next, rather
Totally.
than listening to me and, really having a conversation. And then, of course, you add, this was prior to COVID, you add kind of like, surrounding noise to it, and you don't really hear one another. And it was just like a nightmare
It's a nightmare.
network.
Prior to COVID, I always loathed in-person networking events, conferences and things like that, because I knew I was going to end up in situations talking to people who really weren't necessarily a very strategic fit for like a strategic partner or a referral partner, and that they would, like you said, just be waiting for their opportunity to say what they needed to say about their business, and having a lot of surface level conversations, because I think a lot of business culture requires you to leave the personal at home. And I don't want to do that. Right. I think we bring ourselves to our work and to our business, our core values, the way we operate. And I would rather, like we were talking about introverts before we hit record, right? And I don't really consider myself an introvert, but when it comes to those kinds of things, I really act like one, because I would much rather have an intimate conversation about things that matter than talk about, what you do for people. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to find that out anyway. We can't help but talk about that.
Right. Yeah. No, it's so true. It's these deeper, meaningful connections and conversations. And actually, also pre-COVID, there was this movement on LinkedIn called the LinkedIn local events.
Yeah.
And so me, who always hated networking, all of a sudden I was like, well, these events kind of had a different tone, because they came with topics, and they were really open to this idea of bring yourself to the conversation, bring the human side to the conversation. And so I actually put my hand up together with another local friend here, and we started creating these LinkedIn local networking events. And we created themes, where people would pick cards and have really deep conversations. And people loved it. People were like, oh, this is so different, right? And then every now and then the person would walk in, and you could tell, they were like business suit, and they probably had their stack of business cards. And they're like, what is this? Why are people...
What am I doing here? It's funny, because I used to host a speed networking event in Ravel, and I learned this from a coaching program that I was in, and they would do a lot of like more personal questions. And so I loved that. We only did it once a month, and I was like, we need to do this more often. And so the challenge was calling it speed networking, because what we actually do when you get there is break up into small little breakout rooms. And I would offer questions or topic starters, like, what's the weirdest thing in your fridge right now? Like things that don't have anything to do with business, but you end up deciding kind of who you really mesh with and who you want to take that relationship further with, and really get to know about them and their business and how you can support one another, because you don't really want to support people you don't care about.
Right.
So that's kind of the first step, I think, is deciding who you want to care about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Before, you also addressed core values. So
huge.
What do you think are the core, or I guess there's two questions. What are the core values that we should bring to networking, and why do they matter so much?
I think we should bring our own core values to networking, because the truth is I like to think of them as core drivers, because I think corporate culture has kind of ruined the term core values for us. We think of the little poster on the wall that doesn't really mean anything. But if you really get into your core drivers, what it means is it's what motivates you. It's what drives your behavior. So my core values are freedom, authenticity, and connection. And I notice when I'm in a funk or when I'm out of sorts, it's because something is going against my core values. So if you're going to network, I think you should network with people ideally who share your core values, and then you'll naturally network in a very comfortable way. Like when I started Ravel, I very intentionally seeded the community with women who I knew shared at least one of my core values, knowing that birds of a feather flock together. And so it worked really well, because now we're up around 100 women, and anyone who's referred someone has always been an amazing fit. I have to do very little background on the applicants now, because if I know Maggie introduced someone else to the group, I know Maggie, and I know she's not going to introduce somebody to the group who's not a good fit, because her core values align really well with mine.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it just so much easier to predict how someone's going to behave and what you can expect from them.
Yeah, and it really defines the community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
it makes it easier to hold that community in a shape. Like my goal when I started Ravel was to create a community, just create a space and hold it in a shape such that people would feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to connect with one another and really get to know each other. And by inviting the types of people who would be strategically aligned to be most likely to refer one another, like complementary service providers, they're all B2B service entrepreneurs and they're women. So they have a lot in common. And, financial professionals who serve agencies can network with coaches who serve agencies. And because they share core values, they're going to probably get along pretty well. And it makes it easy to build that kind of rapport that they need to want to connect with one another and see what's up in their business and say, hey, you should talk to so-and-so. So it's like kind of building relationships with like the happy byproduct that you get referrals and business works really well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Usually we hear this idea of quality over quantity. You just mentioned your community is about 100 people. So what do you think about quality over quantity in terms of the networking? Is it a numbers game, or is it a quality game, or is it something in between?
I think it's quality over quantity 100%. And I think it's evolving, honestly, constantly, right? Like, so because your business evolves, maybe you shift who you serve or how you serve that person. And so maybe you have a handful of really great referral partners and you shift your business a little bit. You might have to, some of those referral partners might not be as strategically aligned anymore. And maybe you stay friends, but you might start looking around for different strategic partners who might be more well aligned. But it's not like you have to shift your whole network. You just start networking with a few different people and start figuring out who fits with you. And I think like that 100 is a lot of women. Like I don't intimately know every member of the community anymore. When it was like 20 women, it was really easy. But what we've done is we've separated into smaller groups too. So we have a Slack channel where we have different topics. We have Ravel travel and we have ADHD all day and moms. And so we have these different things that we care about. And the women who gravitate to those channels tend to get to know each other well enough that even if they're not strategically aligned to refer one another as well as some others would be, they kind of cross-pollinate between the community, the micro communities within the community. And then they say, oh, you know who you should get to know. So there's a lot of paying it forward, introducing people to other people. That is such an underrated gift that you can give someone, is to say, I think I know somebody who you need to know, you'd benefit from knowing each other. I mean, making a connection between two people who you think would get along is such a gift.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. You mentioned a few times this word strategic, and I guess it's for you, it's like, well, there's a strategy to networking. Because again, as an introvert, this idea of networking can sometimes feel so overwhelming because we think, well, does that mean I have to network with just anybody? So
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, I don't have the time to network with just anybody. So what is a good strategy that feels, empathic and yet very strategic, and I guess time conscious as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably how most people think of it, is just like it's very overwhelming. You have to make, a lot of people think there's a list you have to make and you have to contact X number of people a day. And that feels very impersonal and kind of like required, which doesn't feel good for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I've approached it differently. Like I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Just for networking though, I don't spend a lot of time scrolling on LinkedIn, but if I find somebody offline, say I'm listening to a podcast or reading a book, or find somebody's website online while I'm Googling or going down a rabbit hole of some kind, and I feel like they are strategically aligned with my business, meaning either they're a complementary service provider, so we serve the same client, but we do different things, or we are a shoulder niche peer, meaning that we do different things, or we do the same sort of thing, but for different clients. So maybe I serve the financial industry and they serve like agencies or something like that. And so we can refer one another because we don't really serve the same ideal client. And this requires knowing what you want and what you're good at. I don't think we are all suited to do, the same thing. We're all so different. I think the successful networking in this way requires that you don't believe in competition. We're all so different. There's so many factors that we can own as, authentic to who we are that maybe somebody else doesn't want to own. And if we know ourselves really well, we can understand what we do best and who we are best suited to serve. And then there's just no way that somebody else is going to bring exactly the same thing to the table that we are. So we have to kind of get rid of that idea first. And then we're free to network with people who look like they do something similar to what we do, but probably don't do exactly what we do, or for the same person. And then you can also look for people who are centers of influence, like coaches if you serve entrepreneurs, maybe you're wanting to network with coaches who serve entrepreneurs, and maybe you're a done for you service provider or something like that. So they're in a position to refer you. They're the people you're looking for to network with are the ones who are most likely to be in a position to refer you. So not somebody who's working in a totally different industry with clients that aren't even related to you. But I don't think you have to go like search for them. I think you can listen to podcasts that are interesting to you and just start taking note of someone who's interesting to you, who you think you might like, and say, is that person in a position to refer me perhaps? And then you can just reach out to that person individually. I usually on LinkedIn, because it's the easiest place to get really connected with somebody.
Yeah. So the idea is really to find referral partners and connect with them.
Yeah. And to be open about it and say, hey, I think we have a lot in common. I think we might benefit from knowing each other. I like you. I like what you're doing. Let's connect and just say hi.
Yeah. Do you then stop at the, first conversation, or how do you, because we always say networking, you have to stay top of mind. So how do you stay top of mind with this person then?
I don't think everyone is going to stay top of mind all the time, right? Like you're going to meet a few people who you really click with and a few people who you don't really click with. One of the reasons that I started Ravel was because it is hard to stay top of mind when we're all busy and we're all running around doing all our stuff all day long. And I'm not the kind of person, we have to do what works for us, right? If you're an organized person and you like lists and you use a CRM, maybe you can stay top of mind with people in your own strategic way. I can't do that. So I put everybody in a container that I like so that I can stay connected with them in a container. We naturally stay connected because we're having calls or somebody's asking a question and we're learning more about their business that way. And we're commenting and sharing our expertise. And so I think it's about proximity. And then if you're connected with them on LinkedIn and you're following them, you might see them. It's like the top of mind thing, I think, is more about the mere exposure effect than staying top of mind. It's just staying in front of someone who you want to stay connected with. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. Just by commenting on their stuff on LinkedIn, they see you. You learn a little bit more maybe about what they do. And I don't think it has to take a long time. It can take 5-10 minutes to go on. And in the case of LinkedIn, I would say, like, a lot of people suggest that you be connected to a ton of people and follow a ton of people, but I find that really overwhelming. So I only follow and want to be connected with the people that I really want to stay connected with, because then my feed isn't really overwhelming and I can see the people that I want to stay in touch with, and I can comment and like and stay in front of them, and then they remember me.
Yeah. So does that mean that you actually, hide some of the updates of people who you don't want to see anymore, just so not to
I just unfollow them or disconnect. I'm a little bit ruthless that way because we only have so much time, and I don't really want to be connected with people that don't align with me really, really well. So, when I've been on LinkedIn for a long, long time, but my career has evolved. For the past 15 years, I'm doing very different things than I was in the very beginning. And so when I decided to reinvest in LinkedIn as a way to connect with people, I went in and I had, thousands of connections, and I got rid of all but 400 and some odd, because it was like, if I don't want to have coffee with this person, I don't need to be on LinkedIn with them.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
Perhaps that's different if you're not an entrepreneur and you're trying to get a job. I don't know about that. But for my situation, where I want to spend time connecting and networking with people who care about the same things I care about, that means there's a lot of people I don't need to connect with.
Right.
And I don't want to waste my time looking at their stuff if I don't care about it.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't know. So it's not mean or anything.
No. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how usually we always hear, oh, use LinkedIn for lead generation, right?
Yeah.
That's not
like
how
that.
you're looking at it. You're like,
No.
well, I only want the people I care about. And so yes, they might be potential clients, or they're, some other level of connection or part of my network. That's how you look at it.
I think you're speaking to something that's really important that I think a lot of people miss. It's a giant mistake to go into like a community or a networking container and think you're going to sell to the people in that container. The benefit of being in a container with 100 women is the connection to the 150 other people they know that they might be able to connect you with. And yes, we buy from each other. I've purchased products and services from tons of the women inside Ravel, and we buy stuff. We hire each other all the time, but it's not because we're sharing our offers and trying to convince each other to buy from us. It's because we happen to know each other really well and we have a problem and we know that person can solve it. But most of the time we're introducing someone to another person. Like I talk to a friend of mine, or I go to an event or something and I hear somebody has a problem, and I will say, I know somebody you should talk to. Let me connect you with so-and-so because I know what she does and I like her and I know she'll do a good job.
Right. Yeah.
So we're building the relationships. We're not selling to people. And LinkedIn is a breeding ground for people doing lead gen on LinkedIn. We should be doing strategic networking.
Yeah, I think that's really the difference, is not thinking of everybody who is somehow looking like a client just because they, have a human body, that you think of them as your ideal client. And especially if you then think of a community where, the minute you bring that kind of energy into a community, the community is basically, is destined to fail.
Yeah, I've seen it happen in Ravel a couple of times where a couple of people have, crossed that line between, hey guys, here's what I'm doing, check it out. Cause we want to share what we're doing and we have a space for that, but a couple of people have, gotten a little bit salesy with it. And it's not that they get slapped down or anything. It's just that nobody responds.
Right.
It's just not something people are looking for in a community where we're trying to build relationships. But what we do is we have calls and we connect with one another and we learn what's going on. And then we will often share on another person's behalf. One of our members, Cara Hoosier, she's getting ready to publish a book. And it's really exciting because she's been through an incredible journey to get where she is. It's called Burnt Out to Lit Up. And it's about preventing yourself from burning out and what to do when you get there. And she's getting ready to launch this. She's looking for people to help her, do reviews and read her book. And I was super excited for her. So instead of her getting on there and she saying, hey guys, look at what I did, I said, can I share this with the community because it's really awesome? And she was like, sure. And so I said, you guys, look at this. Our fellow friend here is publishing a book. This is so exciting. Who wants to help her? I know that anybody else in here who is publishing a book would want the community to help them too. And so it's a very different message when you lift up another woman as opposed to saying, look at me. Right. Look at her sounds a lot different than look at me.
Yeah, for sure.
So we help each other that way.
Yeah. At the same time, you as the host, what would you do? And this is not to do with networking, but just as a fellow community host, what would you do with a member who several times trespasses that kind of unspoken rule that we're not selling in this community? What would you do?
We had one instance in 2 years. In the last 2 years, we've had one instance where someone really kind of did cross the line. And I wasn't online that morning, but I got a bunch of messages from other community members who were like, hey, we don't like this. Like, we got to do something about this. And they were upset for me because she was trying to poach a bunch of members into a different community, which I think is fine, actually, because I don't think poaching is fine, but I think women should have more than one community. They serve different purposes. I intentionally keep Ravel at a very reasonable price because I want to belong to many communities. And I know that other women do too. But the way she went about it was really kind of gross. And so I had to respond to that because the community was saying, this feels gross and we don't want to be around this. And so I said, we're going to go ahead and remove you because this is not how we operate in here. I wish, bless and release. This might just not be the right place for you, right. Which is important to remember because people have different core values. People believe different things. They operate different ways. And just because she doesn't operate the way that we want to operate doesn't mean there's not a place where that's totally fine for people to do, like bless and release. So it's really more of like the community managing itself. I don't moderate and I don't tell them what they can and can't do. So
but in a way it's beautiful to have them, kind of show up and say, hey, this is not how we run here. And that's how it should be.
And that's my whole goal with the community is I'm not a coach. I don't sell them anything other than the place inside the community, like the space. And so that's how I view it is. And I mean, we're kind of getting away from networking into community at this point, but I view it as myself just holding space in a particular shape. And that's my job, is to make sure this space is safe and a good place for people to be vulnerable and build relationships. And if they can't do that, I'm not doing my job. So it has to be a safe space online.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, we kind of meshed community with networking, but that's what
it is, right? Yeah, if when you're networking, you're building community. It just may not have a specific container it lives in.
Yeah. And I also think if we're changing that term of networking into net weaving, then that's what we're really doing in a community is, we're weaving a web together. Because the whole definition of a community is people being connected with each other, not just to you as the host, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So
and this is why I use Slack, but I pay for the analytics. I could use it for free, but I want to see what's happening behind the scenes, which is valuable because more than 50% of the conversations that are happening inside the community are in the DMs. And I know I'm not having that many conversations. There are thousands of conversations happening during the month, and I know I'm not having that many. So there are a lot of private conversations happening and partnerships. I introduced a couple of gals recently who are now partnering in business, and they're super excited and doing some really amazing things. And I know like that has nothing to do with me, but we're weaving these connections, not just for us, but for other people as well. And I think you don't even have to, like, we can think of containers as smaller things, even text threads between two people or three people. Like if I have several people I want to connect with because we all live locally, we're on a text thread together and the three of us send funny memes to one another. And it doesn't have to do with business all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. It can also be more fun, right?
It should be more fun. Don't you think we should have more fun? I need more fun.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way to close with the fun networking. But maybe just also for people who right now, there's so many communities out there yet they're like, well, I don't have the funds or I just can't decide which one to join. So how can you start networking with that community or with that community notion without being in a community? What kind of advice would you give?
I would say just start connecting with people you enjoy. I listen to a lot of podcasts and I reach out to people who I think are excellent, either hosts or interviewees, guests. And I just tell them just start connecting directly with people that you admire or you think have something interesting to say that you align with. Because like there's that thing, homophily, we're attracted to things that are similar to what we love or who we are. And so they're going to be attracted to you if you share something. Either, I mean, location's really obvious, but beyond that, like core values or a mission or a purpose or something like that. Like I think you and I initially got connected on LinkedIn long ago because I heard your podcast and I was like, you're doing awesome things. We need to be connected. And like, it didn't go anywhere for a long time. We had a little back and forth on LinkedIn, but eventually here we are trading podcast interviews. And so I think being in it for the long game and having conversations in the DMs, not expecting every conversation to go somewhere, but being open to it going somewhere.
Yeah. And probably also not coming with this expectation that everyone you reach out to is going to open their calendar to you.
Yeah.
It's like,
like when we connected initially, I was not expecting a one-to-one call. We live across the world from one another and we're both busy and eventually maybe we connect, but I genuinely just wanted to tell you that I really like what you're doing. Yeah. And I think people want to hear that. It's
Right.
people are open to hearing that you agree with them and that you like what they're doing. And if that's all it is, you've put some good energy out in the world and you can leave it at that.
Right, exactly. It doesn't have to become a lead generation.
Yeah, it doesn't have to even become like a really intense networking like relationship. We're going to have this whole gamut of closeness in our network, right? And we don't have the capacity to be really close with a bunch of people, like 5-10 people we're going to be really close with. And if we're all running in roughly the same circles, there's going to be opportunities for collaboration and referrals and those things. So it's a little bit of a leap of faith, but you got to just trust that if you're doing good work and you're helping people and people know you do it, that they're going to tell somebody.
Exactly. Plant those seeds. Yeah.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, do you tell us a bit more about Ravel and your community and where people can find it?
Yeah, the website is ravelcollective.com, and it's for women B2B service entrepreneurs. So financial professionals, lots of marketers, content writers, stuff like that, consultants. We've got some coaches for women entrepreneurs. And it's just a networking community, a really casual networking community where we get to know each other. A bunch of us are going to Mexico in a month together. I haven't met 3 of them, but and it's not an official event. I just said, hey, I'm going to go to Mexico for a week and do some like 2024 business planning. If anybody wants to join me, I've rented this house. And so it's not, we probably won't talk business all the time, but it'll be fun. So we're kind of trying to put some of the fun and like person to person relationship back into business so that we can rely on, I don't know, our relationships to sustain us instead of, just relying on ourselves.
So good.
So yeah, it's $39 a month and it's month to month. And it's just a space that I'm holding for women who want to build more professional relationships.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to it. I always have one last question, Cara, and that's what are you grateful for today or this week, this month?
Oh my goodness. I think I'm most grateful for my family this week. There's a lot of lonely people out there, and I have a wonderful husband and an amazing son, and I'm really grateful for them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.